Eleanor Parker's hands trembled as she clutched the crumpled letter that had changed her life forever, the letter that claimed no man in Philadelphia would ever want her. Too plain, they'd said. Unmarriageable, they'd declared. But here she stood in 1878, her entire future packed into a single worn trunk, as the stagecoach rumbled toward Hillsboro, Texas, and the stranger who would become her husband. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the dusty Texas landscape as the stagecoach rattled along the uneven trail. Eleanor gripped the worn leather seat beneath her, trying to steady herself against both the jarring motion of the coach and her own mounting anxiety. 6 weeks ago, she had been Eleanor Parker, 22 years old, unwanted spinster, living in her brother's crowded Philadelphia home. Now she was a mail-order bride, traveling to meet Isaac Vaughn, a cattle rancher who had advertised for a hardy, practical wife in the matrimonial news. Eleanor had never considered herself beautiful. Her mother had often commented on her unfortunate plainness and lack of feminine charm. When her younger sister had married, leaving Eleanor alone with her brother's unsympathetic wife, the constant reminders of her inadequacies had become unbearable. The final blow came when she overheard her sister-in-law telling a neighbor that Eleanor was destined to be a burden because no man would ever want such a plain, awkward girl. The stagecoach hit a particularly deep rut, jolting Eleanor from her thoughts. The elderly woman sitting across from her gave a sympathetic smile. "First time in Texas, dear?" the woman asked, her voice kind beneath her weathered features. "Yes, madam," Eleanor replied, straightening her simple gray traveling dress. I'm to be married. Mail order." The woman guessed, her expression free of judgment. Eleanor nodded, swallowing hard. "My niece came out the same way 20 years ago," the woman continued. "Happiest marriage I've ever seen. Sometimes the Lord works in unexpected ways." Eleanor offered a polite smile, though her stomach twisted with doubt. She had no illusions about what awaited her. Isaac Vaughn wanted a practical woman to manage his household and help with his ranch. He hadn't asked for beauty or charm, which was fortunate, as Eleanor had been repeatedly told she possessed neither. The driver's voice called down from above. "Hillsboro coming up. Be there in 10 minutes, folks." Eleanor's heart hammered in her chest. In her reticule was the daguerreotype. Isaac had sent a serious-faced man with dark hair and a full beard, standing stiffly beside a horse. She had studied that image for hours, searching for clues about the man who would become her husband. Would he be kind? Would he be disappointed when he saw her? The stagecoach rolled into town, past weathered buildings with false fronts and hitching posts, where horses stood patiently in the late afternoon sun. Hillsboro was larger than Eleanor had expected, with a proper main street lined with businesses, a general store, a hotel, a barber shop, and what appeared to be a busy saloon. The coach came to a halt in front of a small depot, and the driver hopped down to open the door. Eleanor waited for the other passengers to disembark before gathering her courage and stepping out into the dusty street. The heat hit her like a physical force after the relative shade of the coach. She stood uncertainly, scanning the small crowd that had gathered to meet the stagecoach. "Miss Parker," Eleanor turned toward the deep voice, her heart racing. The man before her was tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a faded blue shirt and dust-covered trousers. His face was partially obscured by a dark beard, but she recognized him from the photograph. Isaac Vaughn had come to claim his bride. "Mr. Vaughn," she replied, her voice barely audible. He nodded, removing his hat to reveal thick dark hair shot through with threads of silver at the temples. His eyes, a startling shade of blue, assessed her quickly. Eleanor braced herself for the familiar look of disappointment. Instead, He smiled. It transformed his weathered face, softening the hard lines and bringing a warmth to those blue eyes. "Welcome to Hillsborough, Miss Parker. I hope your journey wasn't too difficult." "It was." "Educational," Eleanor managed. "I've never traveled so far before." Isaac nodded, replacing his hat. "I've got the wagon just over there. Let me get your trunk." As he lifted her trunk with ease, Eleanor followed him to a simple wagon hitched to two sturdy horses. She couldn't help but notice how different he looked from the Philadelphia gentleman she was accustomed to seeing. Isaac Vaughn moved with the easy confidence of a man accustomed to physical labor, his skin tanned from years under the Texas sun. He helped her onto the wagon seat with a gentle hand at her elbow, then climbed up beside her. "My ranch is about 5 miles outside of town," he explained, setting the horses in motion. "I would have brought you straight there, but I thought you might appreciate a night at the hotel after your journey. We can be married tomorrow by the preacher if that suits you." The consideration surprised her. "That's very thoughtful, Mr. Vaughn." He glanced at her, that smile appearing again. "Isaac, if we're to be married tomorrow, you might as well use my given name." "Isaac," she repeated, the name feeling foreign on her tongue. "And I'm Eleanor." "Eleanor," he said, as if testing the sound of it. "A beautiful name." She looked away, embarrassed by the compliment she knew was merely politeness. "I should tell you, Mr. Isaac, I have no illusions about this arrangement. I know you advertised for a practical wife, not—" She gestured vaguely at herself. "I may not be what you expected, but I promise I'm hardworking and can learn whatever is necessary to be useful on your ranch." Isaac's brow furrowed as he guided the horses down the main street. "And what do you think I expected, Eleanor?" The directness of his question caught her off guard. "Well, I'm not considered." The word stuck in her throat. "Pretty," he supplied, his eyes still on the road ahead. Heat rushed to Eleanor's face. "Yes," to her surprise, Isaac chuckled. "My mother used to say that city folks and country folks see the world through different eyes." Maybe that's true about beauty as well. Before Eleanor could decipher his meaning, Isaac pulled the wagon up in front of a 2-story building with a sign proclaiming it the Hillsborough Hotel. "Here we are. I've arranged a room for you. I'll come for you tomorrow morning, and we can speak with Reverend Wilson." As he helped her down from the wagon, his hands strong and steady around her waist, Eleanor felt a flutter of something unfamiliar in her chest. Hope, perhaps, though she tried to quell it. One kind gesture didn't change the reality of what this marriage would be: a practical arrangement, nothing more. "Thank you, Isaac," she said formally. Once her feet were on the ground, he nodded, suddenly seeming unsure of himself. "I'll bring your trunk in. The hotel dining room serves until 7 if you're hungry." As Eleanor followed him into the hotel lobby, she couldn't help but wonder what life would be like as Mrs. Isaac Vaughn. Whatever awaited her, it had to be better than the pitying glances and cutting remarks that had defined her existence in Philadelphia. Here, at least, she might be useful, even if she could never be beautiful. The hotel room was simple but clean, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a small window overlooking the main street. After Isaac had deposited her trunk and bid her an awkward goodbye, Eleanor sank onto the edge of the bed, suddenly overwhelmed by the enormity of what she had done. She had traveled across the country to marry a stranger. Tomorrow, she would become a wife, and her old life would be left behind forever. Eleanor closed her eyes, remembering her brother's relieved expression when she'd announced her decision to answer the advertisement. "It's for the best, Ellie," he'd said, not quite meeting her gaze. "You'll have your own household to manage in Texas. Well, I hear it's quite something." What he hadn't said was that she was becoming a burden, that at 22 she should have been married years ago, that her plainness made her an embarrassment to the family. He hadn't needed to say it, Eleanor had heard it all before. After washing the travel dust from her face and changing into her second-best dress, Eleanor made her way downstairs to the dining room. It was a modest space with half a dozen tables, most occupied by men who glanced up curiously as she entered. The serving girl, a young woman not much older than Eleanor herself, approached with a friendly smile. "You must be Mr. Vaughn's bride," she said, leading Eleanor to a table in the corner. "I'm Sarah. My pa owns the hotel." "Eleanor Parker," she replied, grateful for the young woman's warmth. "Though I suppose it will be Eleanor Vaughn after tomorrow." Sarah's eyes brightened. "Oh, you're marrying Isaac Vaughn. You're a fortunate woman. Half the unmarried women in the county have set their caps for him these past 2 years. Eleanor couldn't hide her surprise. "Really?" "Oh, yes. He's got one of the finest cattle spreads in the county, and he's a good man besides. Never comes to town drunk or gets mixed up in trouble like some." Sarah lowered her voice conspiratorially. "And handsome too, if you don't mind my saying so." I hadn't really thought about it," Eleanor lied, remembering the striking blue of Isaac's eyes. Sarah grinned knowingly. "Well, we're all curious about the woman who captured Isaac Vaughn's interest. He's been alone since his pa died, running that ranch by himself with just a couple of hands to help." As Sarah went to fetch her meal, Eleanor considered this new information. She hadn't expected Isaac to be considered a catch. The thought that other women had wanted him made her own situation seem even more businesslike by comparison. He hadn't chosen her for any personal quality. She was simply the woman who had answered his advertisement. The steak and potatoes Sarah brought were simple but well prepared, and Eleanor realized how hungry she was. As she ate, she observed the other diners, mostly men in work clothes, a few traveling salesmen in suits, and one family with 2 small children. This world was so different from Philadelphia's rigid social structure, with its formal dinners and strict rules of etiquette. After her meal, Eleanor stepped outside onto the hotel's small porch, hoping some fresh air might clear her mind before bed. The main street of Hillsborough was quieter now, with only a few people still about their business. Lights glowed in the saloon down the street, and the sounds of a piano and raucous laughter drifted on the evening air. "First evening in Texas." Eleanor startled at the voice, turning to find a woman in her 50s standing nearby, a shawl wrapped around her shoulders despite the lingering heat. "Yes," Eleanor admitted. "I arrived on today's stagecoach." The woman nodded, moving closer. "I'm Patricia Wilson, Reverend Wilson's wife. My husband mentioned he'd be performing a ceremony tomorrow for Isaac Vaughn and his mail-order bride. I take it that's you, Eleanor Parker," she confirmed, offering her hand. "Yes, we're to be married tomorrow." Patricia's gaze was kind but assessing. "It takes courage to come all this way to marry a man you've never met. Isaac is a good man, though, one of the best in these parts." "So I've been told," Eleanor replied, feeling oddly defensive of a man she barely knew. Patricia smiled. "I've known Isaac since he was a boy. His mother was my dearest friend before she passed. He's had a hard few years, losing both parents and taking on the ranch alone." "I didn't realize," Eleanor said softly. "He didn't mention his mother in his letters. He wouldn't. Isaac keeps his feelings close." Patricia pulled her shawl tighter. "May I offer some advice from someone who's been married 30 years? Eleanor nodded, curious. "Texas isn't like the East. Out here, a woman's worth isn't measured by fancy dresses or society connections. It's measured by strength, the kind that gets up before dawn to help with the work, that faces hardships without complaint, that builds a home in a place that can be unforgiving." Patricia's eyes held Eleanor's steadily. "Isaac needs that kind of strength beside him. He doesn't need a porcelain doll that'll crack in the first dust storm." The words touched something deep inside Eleanor. All her life, she had been judged for what she lacked: beauty, grace, charm. Never had anyone suggested that her practical nature, her willingness to work hard, might actually be valued. "Thank you, Mrs. Wilson," she said sincerely. "I hope I can be what he needs." "You will be," Patricia responded with surprising certainty. "I have a feeling about these things. Now you should rest. Tomorrow's a big day." As Eleanor climbed the stairs back to her room, she felt a curious lightness. Perhaps here, in this strange new place, she might finally find somewhere she belonged. Morning came with golden light streaming through the small window of Eleanor's hotel room. She had slept surprisingly well, despite the unfamiliar surroundings and the knowledge that by nightfall she would be a married woman. As she dressed in her best gown, a dove-gray silk that her sister-in-law had called suitable for someone of your coloring, she tried to calm her racing thoughts. What if Isaac had reconsidered overnight? What if, in the harsh light of day, he had decided she wasn't what he wanted after all? The possibility made her stomach clench with anxiety. A knock at the door startled her from her worries. "Miss Parker, there's a gentleman here for you," came Sarah's voice from the hallway. "Just a moment," Eleanor called, hastily pinning up her light brown hair. She had always envied women with glossy black curls or rich auburn tresses. Her own hair was unremarkable, neither blonde nor brown, neither straight nor curly, but a nondescript in-between that matched the rest of her. When she opened the door, Sarah was gone, but a small bouquet of wildflowers lay on the threshold. Eleanor picked them up, noticing a small card tucked among the blossoms. "For a new beginning," it read in a neat masculine hand. "IV." The simple gesture brought unexpected tears to Eleanor's eyes. She couldn't remember the last time anyone had given her flowers. Carefully, she tucked one of the smaller blooms into her hair before making her way downstairs. Isaac was waiting in the hotel lobby, dressed in what was clearly his Sunday best: clean dark trousers, a white shirt, and a vest. He had trimmed his beard and his dark hair was neatly combed. When he saw her, something shifted in his expression that Eleanor couldn't quite identify. "Good morning," he said, his deep voice resonating in the quiet lobby. "I trust you slept well." "Yes, thank you," Eleanor replied, "and thank you for the flowers. They're lovely." Isaac's cheeks colored slightly beneath his tan. "They're just prairie flowers. Nothing fancy like you probably had back east." "I think they're perfect," Eleanor said honestly. Isaac cleared his throat. "The Reverend is expecting us at 10 o'clock. I thought perhaps we could walk there if that suits you. It's not far and it would give you a chance to see a bit of the town." "I'd like that," Eleanor agreed, surprised by his thoughtfulness. As they stepped out onto the boardwalk, Eleanor was conscious of curious glances from the townspeople going about their morning business. Isaac seemed to notice her discomfort and offered his arm. After a moment's hesitation, she placed her hand in the crook of his elbow, feeling the solid strength of him beneath the fabric of his sleeve. "Folks are just curious," he explained as they walked. "We don't get many new faces in Hillsborough, especially not." He trailed off. "Especially not mail-order brides," Eleanor supplied with a small smile. Isaac returned the smile, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "Especially not lovely ones from Philadelphia." The compliment caught Eleanor off guard. She knew it was simply politeness on his part, but it still warmed her. "Isaac Vaughn," a booming voice interrupted them. A portly man with an impressive mustache approached, grinning widely. "So the rumors are true. You've finally decided to take a wife." Isaac stopped, inclining his head respectfully. "Mayor Thompson." "Yes, this is Miss Eleanor Parker, soon to be Mrs. Vaughn." "Eleanor, this is Harold Thompson, mayor of Hillsborough." "Pleased to meet you, Miss Parker," the mayor said, doffing his hat. "You're a fortunate woman. Isaac here is one of our most respected citizens." "The fortune is mine, I'm sure," Eleanor replied diplomatically. Mayor Thompson chuckled. "And polite, too. Isaac, you've done well for yourself. Now, don't let me keep you from your appointment with Reverend Wilson. Mrs. Thompson will be expecting an invitation to dinner soon to meet your bride properly." "Of course," Isaac agreed, though Eleanor detected a hint of reluctance in his tone. As they continued toward the small white church at the end of the street, Eleanor glanced up at Isaac. "You seem well regarded here." Isaac shrugged. "It's a small town. Everyone knows everyone's business." "Is that why you chose a mail-order bride?" The question slipped out before Eleanor could stop it. "I mean, if you're so well regarded, surely there were local women who would have." Isaac was quiet for a moment, his pace slowing. "The local women know me too well," he finally said. "They see Isaac Vaughn, the rancher with a good piece of land. They don't see—" He shook his head. "It doesn't matter. I wanted someone who would come here for a fresh start, someone practical who understood what kind of life we'd be building." Eleanor considered his words. There was something he wasn't saying, but she didn't press. After all, they were still strangers, despite the fact that in less than an hour they would be husband and wife. The church was a simple white clapboard building with a small steeple. As they approached, the door opened to reveal Reverend Wilson, a tall, thin man with kind eyes that reminded Eleanor of Patricia from the night before. "Isaac, Miss Parker," he greeted them warmly. "Please come in. Patricia is inside to serve as a witness." The ceremony itself was brief and straightforward. Standing before the altar, with sunlight streaming through the plain glass windows, Eleanor repeated vows to a man she barely knew. When Isaac slipped a simple gold band onto her finger, it was "my mother's." He explained softly the reality of what she was doing finally hit her. This was no temporary arrangement. This was her life now. "By the authority vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife," Reverend Wilson declared. "Isaac, you may kiss your bride." Eleanor's heart pounded as Isaac turned to face her. His blue eyes searched hers for a moment, and then he leaned down to place a gentle, almost hesitant kiss on her lips. It was over in an instant, but the warmth of his touch lingered. Patricia Wilson embraced her as Isaac shook hands with the Reverend. "Welcome to the family of Hillsborough," the older woman said warmly. "Remember what I told you about strength." After signing the marriage certificate and accepting congratulations from the Wilsons, Eleanor found herself walking back through town as Mrs. Isaac Vaughn. The simple gold band felt strange on her finger, a constant reminder of her new status. "I need to stop at the general store for a few supplies before we head to the ranch," Isaac explained as they approached a large storefront with Pearson's General Merchandise painted above the door. Inside, the store was a marvel of organized chaos, with barrels of flour and sugar, shelves stocked with canned goods, tools hanging from the ceiling, and bolts of fabric along one wall. The smell of coffee, leather, and tobacco filled the air. A gray-haired man behind the counter looked up and broke into a wide smile. "Isaac Vaughn, and this must be your bride. Martha," he called toward the back of the store. "Come see who's here." A plump, cheerful woman emerged from behind a curtain, wiping her hands on her apron. "Well, I declare. Isaac, you sly fox, not telling us you were getting married today." Isaac shifted uncomfortably. "Eleanor, this is Thomas and Martha Pearson. They've been running this store since before I was born." "It's lovely to meet you," Eleanor said, extending her hand, only to be pulled into a warm embrace by Martha. "None of that formality here, dear," the older woman declared. "Any wife of Isaac's is family as far as we're concerned." As Isaac discussed his order with Thomas, Martha led Eleanor toward a display of household goods. "Now, I'm sure Isaac has the basic necessities, but a woman needs her own things to make a house a home. Have you seen the ranch yet? No, we're heading there after this, Eleanor admitted. Martha nodded knowingly. It's a fine place, though it could use a woman's touch. Isaac's mother had it looking beautiful before she passed, but men. She shook her head fondly. They don't notice the details. Eleanor found herself warming to the motherly shopkeeper. I confess I'm a bit nervous about what to expect. That's natural, dear, but Isaac is one of the good ones. Quiet. Mind you, never was one for many words, even as a boy, but he's fair and kind. Martha lowered her voice. And between us women, there's not a finer-looking man in 3 counties, beard and all. Eleanor couldn't help but smile at Martha's frank assessment. You've known him a long time, then? Since he was knee-high to a grasshopper, Martha confirmed. His father brought him in here every Saturday for candy. Such a serious little boy, always saying please and thank you without being reminded. Broke my heart when they lost his mother to the fever, and then his father to that riding accident 2 years back. Isaac's been shouldering everything alone since then. This glimpse into Isaac's past helped Eleanor understand him a little better. No wonder he seemed so self-contained, so capable. He had learned to be self-sufficient out of necessity. Eleanor, Isaac called from the counter. Is there anything you need while we're here? Surprised to be consulted, Eleanor hesitated. Perhaps some tea, if that's not too extravagant. Something flickered in Isaac's eyes, amusement, perhaps. Tea isn't extravagant, Eleanor. We're not living hand-to-mouth out here, despite what you might have heard about Texas ranchers. Oh, I didn't mean, I know, he interrupted gently. I just want you to understand that while life on the ranch isn't luxurious like Philadelphia, we're comfortable. If you need something, you should ask. Thomas chuckled from behind the counter. Better listen to him, Mrs. Vaughn. Your husband's as stubborn as they come. Mrs. Vaughn. The name still felt strange, but Eleanor found she didn't mind it. After selecting a tin of tea and a few other small items that caught her eye, a packet of wildflower seeds, a bar of lavender soap, Eleanor rejoined Isaac at the counter. We'll load everything in the wagon, Isaac told Thomas. I want to get home before the afternoon heat. Martha pressed a small package into Eleanor's hands as they prepared to leave. A little wedding gift, she explained with a warm smile. Just some of my special cookies and a jar of peach preserves. The way to a rancher's heart is through his stomach, you know. Outside, Isaac's wagon was now loaded with supplies, bags of flour and sugar, coffee beans, canned goods, and other necessities. He helped Eleanor onto the seat with the same gentle touch as before, then climbed up beside her and set the horses in motion. As they left the town behind, the landscape opened up before them, rolling hills covered with prairie grass that waved in the breeze like a golden green sea. In the distance, Eleanor could see a line of trees marking what she guessed was a creek or river. It's beautiful, she said softly, genuinely impressed by the vastness of the Texas countryside. Isaac glanced at her, surprise evident in his expression. Most Eastern women find it empty and harsh at first. It's different, Eleanor acknowledged, but there's something honest about it. It doesn't pretend to be something it's not. Isaac seemed to consider her words carefully. That's a good way of putting it. This land doesn't make promises it can't keep. It's hard sometimes, but it rewards those who understand and respect it. They rode in companionable silence for a while, the steady clop of the horses' hooves and the creaking of the wagon the only sounds. Eleanor found herself studying her new husband's profile, surreptitiously, the strong line of his jaw partially hidden by his beard, the straight nose, the faint lines at the corners of his eyes that suggested he smiled more than she'd yet seen. You can ask, you know, Isaac said suddenly, not taking his eyes off the road ahead. Eleanor startled. Ask what? Whatever it is you're wondering. Now he did turn to look at her, those blue eyes direct and clear. I can practically hear you thinking. Heat rushed to Eleanor's cheeks at being caught staring. I was just wondering about the ranch, and we know so little about each other. Isaac nodded, returning his attention to guiding the horses. My father came to Texas after the war, the one between the states. He was from Virginia originally, but couldn't go back after everything that happened. He bought the land cheap from a man heading to California and built it up from nothing. I was born there in '48, grew up learning the cattle business from him. And your mother? Eleanor prompted gently. A shadow crossed Isaac's face. She was a school teacher from St. Louis, came out to teach at the Hillsborough School and married my father a year later. She loved books, our house is full of them. She taught me to read before I ever set foot in a classroom. His voice softened with memory. She died of typhoid when I was 16. My father never really recovered, though he lived another 14 years. I'm sorry, Eleanor said sincerely. It must have been difficult. Isaac shrugged, though the gesture couldn't hide the emotion in his voice. Life out here is often difficult. But it can be good too. He glanced at her again. What about you? Your letters told me the facts, but not much else. Eleanor hesitated, unsure how much to share. My parents died when I was young, my father of a heart condition, my mother a year later. Some said of grief, though the doctor called it pneumonia. My brother raised me and my younger sister. He did his best, though he was barely more than a boy himself. And what made you answer an advertisement from a Texas rancher? Isaac asked, the question direct but his tone gentle. Eleanor looked down at her gloved hands. I had few prospects in Philadelphia. My sister married well 2 years ago. My brother married last year. I was. The word stuck in her throat. Unwelcome, Isaac supplied quietly. Not unwelcome exactly, just unnecessary. An extra mouth to feed, an extra person to worry about. Eleanor forced herself to continue, feeling she owed him honesty. I've been told all my life that I'm too plain to attract a husband, too practical to be charming. When I saw your advertisement asking for a hardy, practical wife, I thought perhaps my shortcomings might actually be virtues in Texas. Isaac was quiet for so long that Eleanor feared she had said too much. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and intense. The people who told you those things were fools, Eleanor. The unexpected defense made her look up in surprise. Beauty isn't just one thing, Isaac continued, his eyes on the road ahead but his words clearly chosen with care. Out here, a woman who can face hardship without breaking, who can work alongside her husband to build something lasting, that's true beauty. Far more valuable than whatever passing prettiness those Philadelphia folks think matters. Eleanor didn't know how to respond. No one had ever defended her before, least of all someone who barely knew her. There it is, Isaac said, nodding toward the horizon. Vaughn Ranch. Eleanor followed his gaze and saw a 2-story house nestled among a stand of oak trees. Beyond it stretched fenced pastures where cattle grazed, and several outbuildings dotted the landscape. It wasn't as grand as some of the Philadelphia homes she was familiar with, but there was something solid and welcoming about it, a house built to last. As they drew closer, Eleanor could see that the white clapboard house had a wide porch wrapping around 2 sides, with a swing hanging at one end. Flower beds, somewhat overgrown but still showing signs of careful planning, bordered the front of the house. It was easy to imagine Isaac's mother tending those flowers, creating beauty in this remote place. A young man emerged from one of the outbuildings as they approached, waving a greeting. That's Paul, Isaac explained. He works for me, helps with the cattle. There's also Miguel, who you'll meet later. They live in the bunkhouse over there. He pointed to a small building beyond the barn. The wagon rolled to a stop in front of the house, and Isaac set the brake before jumping down. As he came around to help Eleanor, she noticed him glance at her expression anxiously. "It's not what you're used to, I know," he began, but Eleanor shook her head. "It's lovely," she said sincerely. "Truly." The tension in Isaac's shoulders eased slightly as he lifted her down from the wagon. His hands lingered at her waist a moment longer than necessary, and Eleanor felt a flutter of awareness at his proximity. "Welcome home, Mrs. Vaughn," he said softly. And despite everything, the strangeness, the uncertainty, the knowledge that this marriage was based on practicality rather than love, Eleanor felt something warm unfurl inside her at his words. Home. She hadn't had a real home since her parents died. Perhaps, against all expectations, she had finally found one here in this wild Texas landscape, with this quiet, thoughtful man. The first weeks of marriage passed in a whirlwind of adjustments for Eleanor. The Vaughn ranch house, while solidly built and comfortable, had suffered from years of bachelor neglect. Isaac had kept it clean enough, but the feminine touches that had once made it a home had faded. Curtains hung faded and worn, the kitchen lacked organization, and dust had settled into forgotten corners. Eleanor threw herself into the work, grateful to have a purpose. She scrubbed and polished, rearranged furniture, and took inventory of household supplies. Isaac had seemed startled by her industry at first, watching with bemusement as she transformed the house room by room. "You don't have to do all this at once," he'd said on her third day, finding her kneeling before the fireplace, scrubbing years of soot from the stone hearth. "There's time." Eleanor had wiped a strand of hair from her forehead, leaving a smudge of ash. "I want to make it nice, for both of us." Something had softened in Isaac's expression then. "It's already nicer with you here," he'd said quietly, before heading back out to his work. Their marriage remained chaste, to Eleanor's combined relief and confusion. Isaac had given her the main bedroom, my mother's room, he'd explained while he slept in a smaller room down the hall. Each night, he would escort her to her door, bid her a polite good night, and retreat to his own quarters. Eleanor told herself this arrangement was for the best. They were still strangers, after all, learning to live together. Yet sometimes, in the quiet darkness of her room, she would recall the brief kiss they had shared at their wedding and wonder what it might be like to be truly a wife. During the days, Isaac worked with the cattle, occasionally riding out to check the far boundaries of his property. Eleanor busied herself with domestic tasks, gradually making the house her own. She planted the wildflower seeds she had purchased in town in her mother-in-law's neglected flower beds, hoping to restore some of the beauty that must have once graced the property. On this particular morning, 4 weeks after her arrival, Eleanor was in the kitchen preparing bread dough when she heard the sound of approaching horses. Going to the window, she saw Isaac riding in with Paul, both men looking grim. Behind them, they led a horse with a body draped over its back, covered with a blanket. Eleanor hurriedly wiped her hands on her apron and went outside, concern tightening her chest. "What's happened?" Isaac dismounted, his expression grave. "Miguel found him on the north boundary. Looks like he's been shot, probably by rustlers." Eleanor gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Is he dead?" "Yes." Isaac's voice was flat. "I didn't recognize him. Probably a drifter who stumbled onto something he shouldn't have." Paul, a gangly young man of 19, looked pale beneath his tan. "Sheriff needs to be notified." Isaac nodded. "I'll ride into town. Paul, you and Miguel prepare a grave up on the hill near the old oak. We can't leave him for the coyotes, whoever he was." He turned to Eleanor. "I'm sorry to bring this to our doorstep." "Don't apologize," she said firmly. "You're doing what's right." Something like gratitude flickered in Isaac's eyes. "I'll be back before dark. Keep the doors locked while I'm gone." As Isaac rode toward town, Eleanor returned to the kitchen, her mind troubled. She had known, in an abstract way, that life in the West could be dangerous. But the reality of death arriving so suddenly on their doorstep was sobering. It made her realize how isolated they were out here, how vulnerable despite Isaac's strength and capability. The afternoon dragged on, the bread baked and cooling on the rack, but Eleanor found it difficult to concentrate on her usual tasks. Every sound made her start, and she found herself checking the windows frequently for any sign of Isaac's return. When she finally heard hoofbeats approaching, the sun was low in the sky, casting long shadows across the yard. Relief flooded through her as she saw Isaac riding toward the house, followed by a man she didn't recognize, presumably the sheriff. She met them at the door, her anxiety evident despite her attempt to appear calm. "Eleanor, this is Sheriff James Reeves," Isaac introduced. "Sheriff, my wife Eleanor." The sheriff, a weathered man in his 50s with gray streaks in his dark hair, tipped his hat. "Madam, sorry to meet under these circumstances. Please come in," Eleanor invited. "I have coffee and fresh bread if you're hungry." Both men accepted gratefully, following her into the kitchen where she quickly served them. As they ate, the sheriff explained that there had been reports of cattle rustling in the next county over. "Could be the same gang," he theorized. "They're getting bolder. Used to just take a few head here and there. Now they're killing anyone who gets in their way." Isaac's jaw tightened. "I'll need to increase patrols along the boundaries." "You be careful," the sheriff warned. "These aren't just opportunists, they're organized and dangerous." He glanced at Eleanor. "Might be best if your wife stays close to the house for a while." After the sheriff had examined the body and taken his leave, promising to send telegrams to neighboring counties to see if anyone matched the description of the dead man, Isaac and Eleanor stood on the porch watching the sunset. "I'm sorry," Isaac said suddenly. "This isn't what you signed up for." Eleanor turned to look at him. "What do you mean, danger, death, the constant struggle of ranch life?" He wouldn't meet her eyes. "You should be in a nice house in Philadelphia, not worrying about cattle rustlers and strange bodies showing up on your property." "No one wanted me in Philadelphia," Eleanor reminded him gently. "Here, at least, I have purpose. I'm building something with you." Isaac finally looked at her, his blue eyes searching her face. "You're an extraordinary woman, Eleanor Vaughn. Do you know that?" The compliment caught her off guard. "I'm just practical, as you requested in your advertisement. You're far more than that." Isaac hesitated, then reached out to touch her cheek, his calloused fingers surprisingly gentle. "I've been thinking it since the moment you stepped off that stagecoach, but I wasn't sure how to say it. You're beautiful, Eleanor. Not in the way those fools back east measure beauty, but in a way that matters out here." Eleanor's heart raced at his touch, at his words. "You don't have to say that, Isaac. I know what I am." "So do I," he insisted, his voice low and fervent. "You're the woman who came across the country to make a life with a stranger, who's transformed my house back into a home, who didn't faint or fall apart when death arrived at our door. That's true beauty, Eleanor, the kind that lasts." Before she could respond, Isaac leaned down and kissed her. Unlike their wedding kiss, this one lingered, his lips warm and certain against hers. Eleanor felt herself responding, her hands coming up to rest against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her fingers. When Isaac finally pulled back, his eyes were dark with emotion. "I've been keeping my distance because I thought you needed time, because I didn't want you to feel obligated. But Eleanor, I want a real marriage, if you'll have me." The vulnerability in his expression, in his voice, moved Eleanor deeply. This strong, capable man was offering her his heart, asking for hers in return. not out of obligation or practicality but out of genuine feeling. "I want that too," she whispered, and was rewarded with a smile that transformed Isaac's face, making him look years younger. That night when Isaac walked her to her bedroom door, there was a new tension between them, a sweet anticipation that made Eleanor's pulse quicken. When he bent to kiss her good night, the kiss deepened, became something more urgent. His hands came to rest at her waist, drawing her closer. "Eleanor," he murmured against her lips. "May I come in?" In answer, she reached behind her to open the door, leading him into the room that was now truly becoming hers. As the door closed behind them, Eleanor felt as if she was closing the door on her old life, the life where she had been unwanted, unappreciated, unloved. Here, in this room, with this man, she was beginning something new. Later, as they lay together in the darkness, Isaac's arm around her and his breathing deep and even beside her, Eleanor realized that for the first time in her life, she felt truly beautiful. The discovery of the dead man marked a turning point in life at the Vaughn ranch. Isaac became more vigilant, often riding the boundaries of his property with Paul and Miguel. He insisted that Eleanor learn to shoot, just in case, he said grimly, placing his father's old revolver in her hands and teaching her how to hold it, aim it, fire it. The weight of it felt foreign and frightening, but Eleanor practiced dutifully, understanding the necessity. Despite the shadow of danger, their personal happiness deepened. Isaac now shared Eleanor's bed every night, and their days fell into a comfortable rhythm of work and companionship. Eleanor found that Isaac, once he began to open up, had a quiet wit and a thoughtful nature that resonated with her own. They often spent evenings on the porch swing, talking about everything from books to cattle prices, from childhood memories to dreams for the future. "I'd like to expand the house someday," Isaac confided one evening in late summer as they watched lightning bugs rise from the grass. "Add a proper dining room, maybe another bedroom or two." Eleanor glanced at him, a question in her eyes. "For children?" A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "I've always wanted a family. My parents had only me. They tried for more, but it never happened. I used to wish for brothers and sisters." "I'd like that too," Eleanor admitted softly. "A house full of children." Isaac took her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "You'd be a wonderful mother." The tenderness in his voice made Eleanor's heart swell. How far they had come from that first awkward meeting at the stagecoach. Now she couldn't imagine her life without Isaac, his steady strength, his unexpected gentleness, his growing love that made her feel treasured in a way she had never thought possible. As summer gave way to fall, the threat from the rustlers seemed to recede. There had been no more incidents on Vaughn land, and the sheriff reported that the gang appeared to have moved on to easier targets. Life began to settle into a more relaxed pattern, and Eleanor found herself thinking more about the future, about the family she and Isaac might create together. It was during this peaceful period, as October painted the landscape in golds and russets, that Eleanor made a discovery that would change everything. She had been feeling unusually tired for several days, sometimes overcome with a wave of nausea in the mornings. At first, she attributed it to the changing seasons, perhaps a mild autumn cold. But when she realized that her monthly courses were late, very late, she began to suspect another cause. She kept the suspicion to herself for a week, wanting to be certain before sharing the news with Isaac. But as the symptoms persisted and her certainty grew, Eleanor could no longer contain her joy. She decided to tell Isaac that evening, after supper. The meal was simple roast beef, potatoes, and fresh bread, but Isaac ate with appreciation, complimenting her cooking as he always did. Eleanor found herself watching him, imagining how he would react to her news. Would he be pleased? Worried? She thought of the bedroom he had mentioned adding to the house and smiled to herself. "What's that smile for?" Isaac asked, catching her expression across the table. "I have something to tell you," Eleanor said, her voice steady despite the fluttering in her stomach. Isaac set down his fork, giving her his full attention. "Is everything all right?" "Everything is wonderful," she assured him. "Isaac, I believe I'm going to have a baby, our baby." For a moment, he simply stared at her as if processing her words. Then his face transformed with a joy so pure, so unrestrained that it took Eleanor's breath away. In an instant, he was out of his chair and kneeling beside hers, taking her hands in his. "A baby," he repeated, his voice thick with emotion. "Eleanor, are you certain?" She nodded, tears of happiness pricking at her eyes. "As certain as I can be without a doctor's confirmation. It will be springtime, I think April or May." Isaac's hand moved to rest gently on her still flat stomach, wonder in his eyes. "A child, our child." He looked up at her, and Eleanor was startled to see tears in his eyes as well. "Thank you." "For what?" she asked, touching his cheek tenderly. "For answering my advertisement. For coming all this way. For making me the happiest man in Texas." He rose slightly to kiss her, a kiss full of promise and love. "I love you, Eleanor Vaughn. I think I started falling in love with you the moment you stepped off that stagecoach, looking so brave and so vulnerable all at once." "I love you too," Eleanor whispered against his lips, the words coming easily now, though they had taken time to form. "More than I ever thought possible." That night, as they lay together in their bed, Isaac's hand protectively curved around her midsection. Eleanor reflected on the journey that had brought her here. The painful words of her Philadelphia relatives, the long and uncertain journey across the country, the nervousness of meeting Isaac for the first time, all of it had led to this moment of perfect happiness. "What are you thinking about?" Isaac murmured sleepily beside her. "How strangely life works out," Eleanor replied. "If my sister-in-law hadn't been so eager to be rid of me, if I hadn't been told all my life that I was too plain to find a husband in Philadelphia, I might never have seen your advertisement. I might never have come to Texas. I might never have found you." Isaac propped himself up on one elbow, looking down at her in the dim light of the bedside lamp. "Those people did us both a favor then. But they were wrong about you, Eleanor. You're the most beautiful woman I've ever known, inside and out." The sincerity in his voice and his eyes left no room for doubt. Here was a man who truly saw her, who valued her for exactly who she was. The realization filled Eleanor with a warmth that went beyond physical attraction, beyond even the deep affection they had developed. This was what love meant, being truly seen, truly known, truly valued. "We should visit Philadelphia someday," Isaac mused, settling back beside her. "Show them what they lost," Eleanor chuckled. "I'm not sure they'd understand. They measure success and beauty by very different standards." "Then they're fools," Isaac declared simply. "But I'm grateful for their foolishness. It brought you to me." As Eleanor drifted toward sleep, wrapped in her husband's arms with their unborn child nestled between them, she thought about the strange twists of fate that had led her here. The cruel words that had driven her from Philadelphia had become the catalyst for finding true happiness. The very qualities that had been dismissed as flaws in the East, her practical nature, her straightforward manner, her willingness to work hard, were valued as strengths in this new life. She had come to Texas believing herself plain and unwanted, only to discover that beauty, like so much else, looked different depending on where you stood. In Isaac's eyes, she was beautiful. In this place, she was needed. In this life, she had found her true home. The news of Eleanor's pregnancy spread quickly through Hillsborough. Martha Pearson arrived at the ranch the very next day with a basket of preserves and home remedies for morning sickness, her round face beaming with pleasure. "First babies are special," she declared, patting Eleanor's hand. "And this child will have the finest parents in Hill County." Patricia Wilson came bearing a tiny knitted blanket in soft yellow wool. "I started it the day you were married," she admitted with a twinkle in her eye. "I had a feeling." Even Mayor Thompson's wife, a somewhat formidable woman whom Eleanor had met only briefly at church, made a special visit to offer congratulations and to invite the Vaughns to Thanksgiving dinner at the mayor's house. "A proper welcome to Hillsborough society," she explained grandly, though Eleanor suspected Isaac was less than thrilled by the invitation. "Do we have to go?" he asked that evening after Mrs. Thompson had departed in her smart buggy. "Those dinners are always full of gossip and politics." Eleanor smiled at his discomfort. "It would be rude to decline. Besides, I think it might be nice to be part of the community." Isaac sighed in resignation. "You're right, of course, but don't say I didn't warn you when the mayor starts in on his plans to bring the railroad to Hillsborough." As Eleanor's belly began to swell with the growing child, Isaac became increasingly protective. He insisted on hiring a young woman from town, Sarah's younger sister, Jenny, to help with the heavier household chores. When Eleanor protested that she was perfectly capable, Isaac was uncharacteristically firm. "My mother lost 2 babies before me," he explained, his expression serious. "I won't take any chances with you or our child." Touched by his concern, Eleanor agreed to the help, though she continued to manage the household and cook most meals herself. She found that keeping busy helped with the occasional bouts of melancholy that surprised her, moments when she missed her own mother fiercely, wishing for her guidance during this new chapter of life. Isaac noticed one such moment as Eleanor stood at the kitchen window, gazing out at nothing in particular, one hand resting on the gentle curve of her stomach. "What is it?" he asked, coming to stand behind her, his arms encircling her waist. Eleanor leaned back against him, drawing comfort from his solid presence. "I was just thinking about my mother, wishing she could be here to see our child born." Isaac's arms tightened slightly around her. "I understand. I think about my parents too, how much they would have loved being grandparents." "Tell me more about your mother," Eleanor requested, turning in his arms to face him. "You've spoken of her, but I still feel I know so little." Isaac's expression softened with memory. "She was small, barely came up to my father's shoulder, but she had a strength about her that everyone respected. She loved music, though she claimed she couldn't carry a tune in a bucket. She used to read to me every night, doing all the different voices for the characters." He smiled at the recollection. "And she loved this land despite how hard it was sometimes. She said it had a kind of honesty to it." "Like someone else I know," Eleanor said softly, reaching up to touch his cheek. Isaac caught her hand and pressed a kiss to her palm. "She would have loved you, Eleanor. You have that same quiet strength, that same ability to find beauty in unexpected places." The comparison to a woman who had clearly been so central to Isaac's life warmed Eleanor deeply. "I wish I could have known her." "Sometimes I think you would have understood each other better than anyone," Isaac replied. "You both chose to leave comfortable lives to come to this wild place. You both saw something worthwhile here that others missed." As winter descended on the Texas Hill Country, bringing cold winds and occasional light snowfalls, life at the Vaughn Ranch took on a cozy intimacy. The threat from the rustlers seemed to have passed entirely. The sheriff reported that several members of the gang had been captured in Oklahoma territory, and the daily rhythm of ranch life continued at a more measured pace during the colder months. Isaac spent more time at home, making repairs and improvements to the house that Eleanor had been suggesting for months. He built shelves in the kitchen, fixed the loose boards on the porch, and began work on the promised dining room extension. Eleanor would often sit nearby with her sewing or mending, enjoying the companionable silence punctuated by occasional conversation. "Have you thought about names?" she asked one afternoon as Isaac measured boards for a new cabinet. He looked up, sawdust clinging to his beard. "For the baby. I thought perhaps James for a boy after my father." "James Vaughn," Eleanor tested the name aloud. "It's a good, strong name, and for a girl," Isaac hesitated. "I'd like to honor my mother, but Margaret always seemed rather formal to me." "What about Maggie?" Eleanor suggested. "It's friendlier, but still honors her." A smile spread across Isaac's face. "Maggie Vaughn, I like that." "Maggie Rose Vaughn," Eleanor elaborated. "Rose was my mother's name." Isaac set down his tools and came to kneel beside her chair, placing a gentle hand on her growing belly. "James or Maggie," he said softly. "Either way, this child is already so loved." As if in response, Eleanor felt a distinct flutter beneath Isaac's hand, the first definite movement she had felt from the baby. Her eyes widened in surprise and delight. "Isaac," the baby moved. Right there, did you feel it? The wonder that spread across his face was answer enough. "That's our child," he whispered, awe in his voice. "Our child, Eleanor." The moment crystallized for Eleanor all that had changed in her life. A year ago, she had been the unwanted spinster in her brother's Philadelphia home, convinced that no man would ever look at her with love, that she would never know the joy of creating a family. Now she sat in a home that was truly hers, beside a man who cherished her, feeling the first stirrings of the child they had created together. It was more happiness than she had ever dared to imagine, and the gratitude she felt was almost overwhelming. "I love you," she said simply, the words inadequate to express the depth of her feeling, but all she had to offer. Isaac's eyes, when they met hers, held the same overwhelming emotion. "And I love you, Eleanor Vaughn, more than I have words to tell you." Thanksgiving at Mayor Thompson's house proved to be exactly as Isaac had predicted, full of town gossip and the mayor's enthusiastic plans for Hillsborough's future growth. Eleanor, now visibly pregnant in her carefully altered best dress, found herself the center of much feminine attention, receiving advice on childbirth and child-rearing from every married woman present. "The first one is always the hardest, Mrs. Peterson," the blacksmith's wife, informed her solemnly. "I was in labor for 20 hours with my William." "Nonsense," countered Mrs. Wilson. "It's different for every woman. My first came so quickly the doctor barely had time to arrive." Eleanor listened politely to the contradictory advice, privately thinking that no amount of second-hand information could truly prepare her for what lay ahead. The experience would be uniquely hers, just as her marriage had been uniquely her own, despite the common circumstances of how it began. Across the room, she caught Isaac's eye as he stood trapped in conversation with the mayor and several other men. He gave her a small, private smile that conveyed both sympathy for their social obligation and deep affection. Even in a crowded room, they had developed the ability to communicate without words, a silent understanding that Eleanor treasured. As Christmas approached, Eleanor found herself missing certain traditions from her Eastern upbringing: the elaborate decorations, the carolers in the streets, the festive church services. But Texas had its own Christmas customs, she discovered, as Isaac brought home a small pine tree to set up in the parlor. "It's not as grand as what you probably had in Philadelphia," he apologized as they decorated it with simple ornaments, some that had belonged to Isaac's mother, others that Eleanor had crafted herself from fabric scraps and pine cones. "It's perfect," she assured him, standing back to admire their handiwork. The tree was indeed smaller than those she remembered from Philadelphia, but somehow it seemed more meaningful, a symbol of the new traditions they were creating together. On Christmas Eve, they attended services at the small church in Hillsborough, joining their neighbors in singing carols by candlelight. Reverend Wilson spoke movingly about hope and new beginnings, glancing meaningfully toward Eleanor and Isaac as he mentioned the promise of new life. Afterward, as they drove home in the wagon beneath a canopy of stars, Eleanor felt a profound sense of peace. The night was clear and cold, the moon casting silver light across the winter landscape. Beside her, Isaac guided the horses with confident hands, occasionally glancing at her to make sure she was warm enough beneath the blanket he had tucked around her. "This is my favorite Christmas ever," Eleanor said softly, watching her breath form small clouds in the cold air. Isaac looked surprised, even with no big celebrations or fancy gifts, especially with no big celebrations or fancy gifts, she corrected him. "This feels real in a way those never did. This feels like home." Isaac's smile in the moonlight made her heart swell. "You've made it a home, Eleanor." "I lived in that house for years after my mother died, but it wasn't a home until you came." Later that night, after exchanging the simple gifts they had prepared for each other, a new book of poetry for Eleanor, a handcrafted leather belt for Isaac, they sat before the fireplace, enjoying the warmth and the quiet togetherness of the evening. "I have something else for you," Isaac said suddenly, reaching into his pocket. "It's not exactly a Christmas gift, more of a belated wedding present." He handed her a small wooden box, beautifully crafted with a simple flower pattern carved into the lid. Eleanor opened it carefully to find a delicate gold locket nestled on a bed of velvet. "Isaac, it's beautiful," she breathed, lifting it from the box. The locket was oval-shaped with an intricate engraved pattern on its surface. "Open it," Isaac encouraged. Inside, she found a tiny portrait, a woman with kind eyes and a gentle smile, her dark hair arranged in the fashion of 20 years earlier. "Your mother," Eleanor guessed, studying the face for resemblances to her husband. Isaac nodded. "And look at the other side." Eleanor turned the locket to see the other half contained a small lock of dark hair. "Is this?" "My hair from when I was a baby," Isaac confirmed. "My mother wore this locket every day of her life after I was born. My father gave it to her." He reached out to take Eleanor's hand. "I want you to have it now, to wear as she did. And perhaps someday we can put a lock of our child's hair beside mine." The thoughtfulness of the gift brought tears to Eleanor's eyes. It wasn't merely a piece of jewelry. It was an invitation into Isaac's family history, a recognition that she was now part of that story. "I'll treasure it always," she promised, closing the locket and clasping it around her neck. As winter gradually gave way to the first tentative signs of spring, Eleanor's body changed more dramatically with the growing child. Her movements became slower, more deliberate, and she found herself tiring more easily. Isaac watched her with a mixture of pride and concern, insisting that she rest frequently and taking on more household duties than ever before. "You don't need to coddle me," Eleanor protested one afternoon when he insisted on carrying a basket of laundry that she could have easily managed herself. "I'm not coddling you," Isaac countered. "I'm helping my wife who happens to be carrying my child. There's a difference." Despite her token protests, Eleanor found his attentiveness touching. It was evidence of how far they had come from their initial practical arrangement. What had begun as a marriage of convenience had transformed into something neither of them could have anticipated: a deep and abiding love, built on mutual respect and shared dreams. As April arrived, bringing with it wildflowers that carpeted the Texas hillsides in vibrant color, Eleanor's time grew near. Dr. Matthews, the town physician, began making weekly visits to the ranch, assuring both expectant parents that everything was proceeding normally. "First babies often come a bit late," he explained during one such visit, patting Eleanor's hand reassuringly. "But everything looks just as it should." Isaac, who had insisted on being present for the examination despite the doctor's initial surprise, nodded with relief. "And Eleanor, she's well. As healthy as any mother-to-be I've ever seen," Dr. Matthews confirmed, packing away his stethoscope. "Just make sure she continues to rest adequately and eats well." After the doctor departed, Eleanor found Isaac standing at the bedroom window, looking out toward the distant hills, his expression troubled. "What is it?" she asked, coming to stand beside him, her hand resting on the prominent curve of her belly. Isaac turned to her, worry evident in his blue eyes. "I'm sending Paul to stay in town starting tomorrow so he can fetch the doctor quickly when the time comes." "That's wise," Eleanor agreed, "but there's something else bothering you." Isaac hesitated, then admitted, "I'm afraid, Eleanor. My mother. She had such difficulty with childbirth, and out here so far from proper medical care." Eleanor took his hand and placed it on her stomach where the baby was particularly active. "Feel that? That's our child, strong and healthy, and I'm strong too, Isaac. This is what women have been doing since the beginning of time." "I know," he said, his large hand gentle against her. "But you are precious to me, Eleanor. You and this child, you're my whole world now." The naked vulnerability in his voice moved her deeply. This was a side of Isaac that few ever saw, the uncertainty beneath the capable exterior, the depth of feeling behind the quiet reserve. Eleanor reached up to touch his face, her fingers trailing along the line of his beard. "We're going to be fine," she promised. "All three of us." The baby arrived on a perfect spring morning, just as the sun was beginning to warm the dew-covered grass outside the bedroom window. Eleanor's labor had begun shortly after midnight, and Isaac had immediately sent Paul racing toward town to fetch the doctor. To Eleanor's relief, Dr. Matthews arrived quickly, his calm competence a steadying presence in the room. Unlike many physicians, he did not insist that Isaac leave. "Some husbands prefer not to witness childbirth," he remarked, "but in my experience their presence often comforts the mother." And so Isaac remained, holding Eleanor's hand through each contraction, wiping her brow, murmuring encouragement as the hours passed. His strength became hers, his unwavering support giving her courage when the pain seemed unbearable. "You're doing wonderfully," he told her again and again. "You're the strongest person I've ever known, Eleanor." As the sun broke over the horizon, painting the room in golden light, Eleanor gave one final push, and their child entered the world with a lusty cry that brought tears to both parents' eyes. "A boy, Doctor," Matthews announced, lifting the squalling infant for them to see. "A fine, healthy son. James Isaac Vaughn, named for both his grandfather and his father, had dark hair like Isaac's, and when he finally opened them, eyes of deepest blue." Eleanor couldn't stop looking at him, marveling at the tiny fingers, the perfect rosebud mouth, the button nose. Every detail was miraculous to her, evidence of the love she and Isaac had created together. "He's beautiful," Isaac whispered, cradling his son with hands that seemed suddenly enormous compared to the tiny infant. "Perfect in every way, like his mother." Eleanor smiled tiredly, exhausted but filled with a joy so profound it seemed to radiate from within her. "I think he has your eyes." "Poor child," Isaac joked, though his own eyes were suspiciously bright with unshed tears. "But he has your nose, thank goodness, as doctor." Matthews discreetly busied himself with his medical bag, giving the new family a moment of privacy. Isaac leaned down to place a gentle kiss on Eleanor's forehead. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "For our son, for our life together. For answering that advertisement and traveling all the way to Texas to find me." Eleanor reached up to touch his face, seeing in it all the love she had ever hoped to find. "It was the best decision I ever made," she said simply. Later, after Dr. Matthews had departed with promises to return the next day, and Eleanor had been settled comfortably in bed with little James sleeping peacefully beside her. Isaac brought her a cup of tea and sat on the edge of the bed, watching his wife and son with undisguised wonder. "I've been thinking," he said after a while, "about what you told me when we first met about being told you were too plain to find a husband in Philadelphia." Eleanor glanced up from the baby's face. "What about it?" "I just want to make sure you know how beautiful you are to me," Isaac said earnestly. "Not just because you've given me a son, though that's a miracle I'll never take for granted, but because of who you are, Eleanor. Your courage, your kindness, your strength. From the moment I saw you standing beside that stagecoach, looking so brave despite your uncertainty, I thought you were the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen." Eleanor felt tears well in her eyes at the sincerity in his voice. "Isaac, I need you to believe it," he continued, taking her hand. "Those people in Philadelphia were blind, Eleanor. They couldn't see the true beauty that was right in front of them, but I see it. Every day I see it." Eleanor squeezed his hand, too moved for words. In that moment, with her husband beside her and their newborn son sleeping peacefully between them, she felt more beautiful, more valued, more loved than she had ever dreamed possible. 5 years later, the sound of children's laughter echoed across the yard as Eleanor stood on the porch, watching Isaac chase their 2 children in a game of tag. 5-year-old James, tall for his age and the image of his father, darted behind the water trough, while 3-year-old Maggie, her light brown hair flying behind her, squealed with delight as Isaac pretended he couldn't find her behind a tree. "I wonder where those children of mine have gone," Isaac called out in an exaggerated voice. "I simply cannot see them anywhere." "I'm right here, Papa." Maggie couldn't contain herself, jumping out from her hiding place with a giggle that made Eleanor's heart swell with love. Isaac feigned surprise, then scooped the little girl up in his arms, spinning her around as she shrieked with joy. "There you are! What a clever girl you are, surprising your papa like that." James, not to be outdone, abandoned his hiding place to tug at Isaac's pant leg. "Me too, Papa." "Spin me too." Setting Maggie down carefully, Isaac obliged his son, lifting him high into the air as the boy spread his arms like wings. "Look at you fly, James, higher than an eagle." Eleanor smiled at the scene, one hand resting absently on her stomach where a 3rd child, still their secret for now, was just beginning to make its presence known. The doctor had confirmed her suspicions just yesterday, and she planned to tell Isaac tonight after the children were asleep. So much had changed in the years since she had stepped off that stagecoach as a mail-order bride, unsure of her future and convinced of her own plainness. The ranch had prospered under Isaac's careful management, allowing them to hire more hands and make significant improvements to the property. The house had been expanded as promised, with a proper dining room and additional bedrooms for the growing family. Eleanor's flower gardens now surrounded the house in a riot of color from spring through fall, and her vegetable garden provided much of their food. But the most profound changes had been within Eleanor herself. The uncertain young woman who had believed herself unwanted and unlovable had blossomed into a confident wife and mother, secure in her husband's love and her own worth. The cruel words from her past had lost their power, replaced by Isaac's constant affirmation and the undeniable evidence of the life they had built together. "Mama, come play with us," James called, breaking into her thoughts. "Yes, please come, Mama." Maggie echoed, her blue eyes so like Isaac's wide with excitement. Eleanor laughed and descended the porch steps to join her family. As Isaac's arm slipped around her waist, drawing her into their circle of play, she reflected on the strange and wonderful journey that had brought her here. She had come to Texas believing herself plain, only to discover that beauty, like love itself, could be found in the most unexpected places. In Isaac's eyes, in their children's laughter, in the life they had created together, Eleanor had found a beauty more lasting, more meaningful than anything she could have imagined in her Philadelphia days. As the Texas sunset painted the sky in brilliant hues of gold and crimson, Eleanor Vaughn looked at her husband and children and knew with absolute certainty that she had found her true home not just in this place, but in the love that had transformed her life. Isaac caught her eye over the children's heads and smiled that special smile that, even after 5 years of marriage, still made her heart skip a beat. "Happy," he mouthed silently. Eleanor nodded, returning his smile with one of her own. "Completely," she whispered, and knew it was the truest word she had ever spoken. That night, after the children were tucked into bed with stories and lullabies, Eleanor and Isaac sat together on the porch swing that had become their favorite place for quiet conversation. The spring air was soft and fragrant with the scent of Eleanor's roses, and in the distance, a whippoorwill called into the gathering darkness. "I have something to tell you," Eleanor said, nestling against Isaac's side as his arm came around her shoulders. "That sounds serious," he replied, though his tone was light. "Should I be concerned?" Eleanor took his free hand and placed it gently on her stomach. Not concerned, perhaps excited. It took only a moment for understanding to dawn in Isaac's eyes. "Eleanor, are you saying?" She nodded, smiling at the wonder spreading across his face, the same expression he had worn when she'd told him about James, and then about Maggie. "Dr. Matthews confirmed it yesterday. We'll have a new addition to our family by Christmas." Isaac's whoop of joy startled a nearby mockingbird into flight. He pulled Eleanor into his arms, kissing her with all the passion of their early days together. "Another child," he said when they finally broke apart, his voice thick with emotion. "Eleanor, you've made me the happiest man alive." 3 times over now. Eleanor laughed, wiping a tear from the corner of her eye. "And you've made me happier than I ever dreamed possible." She hesitated, then added softly, "Sometimes I think about that advertisement you placed, how different our lives would be if I hadn't seen it, if I hadn't been desperate enough to answer it." "Not desperate," Isaac corrected gently. "Brave." "It took remarkable courage to travel across the country to marry a stranger." "It was the best decision I ever made," Eleanor said, echoing words she had spoken on the day of James's birth. "Even if I had no idea at the time where it would lead." Isaac brushed a strand of hair from her face, his touch as tender as it had been on their wedding day. "When I placed that advertisement, I thought I was looking for a practical arrangement, a sensible wife for a lonely rancher. I never expected to find the love of my life. And I never expected to find someone who would see past my plainness to whatever beauty might lie beneath," Eleanor admitted. Isaac shook his head, the familiar argument bringing a smile to his lips. "When will you believe me, Eleanor Vaughn? You were never plain. Those people in Philadelphia were blind. From the moment I saw you, you were the most beautiful woman I'd ever laid eyes on, not because of any conventional standard, but because of the courage in your eyes, the kindness in your smile, the strength in your bearing." Eleanor had heard these words many times over their years together, but they never failed to warm her heart. "I believe you now," she said softly. "You've taught me to see myself through your eyes." As the stars emerged one by one in the vast Texas sky, Eleanor and Isaac sat together in comfortable silence. his hand resting protectively over the new life growing within her. From inside the house came the soft sounds of their sleeping children, and in the distance, the gentle lowing of cattle in the night pasture. This was her life now, so different from anything she could have imagined when she left Philadelphia 5 years ago. She had come west as a mail-order bride, branded too plain for marriage in her hometown, only to find a man who saw beauty where others had seen only inadequacy. With Isaac, she had created not just a family, but a home filled with love and laughter, work and purpose. "What are you thinking about?" Isaac asked, noticing her thoughtful expression. Eleanor smiled, leaning up to place a gentle kiss on his bearded cheek. "I'm thinking that sometimes the most beautiful journeys begin with a single step into the unknown." Isaac nodded, understanding as he always did. "And end with finding exactly where you're meant to be." As the whippoorwill called again from the darkness, Eleanor closed her eyes and sent a silent prayer of gratitude into the night for the advertisement that had changed her life, for the husband who had taught her the true meaning of beauty, and for the family they had created together in this wild, wonderful Texas home.